Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other, and today's episode is Merlin's Season 5, Episode 5, The Dark Tower. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in the episode. So, the episode begins with Elliot and Gwen going to visit their father's grave, and on the way back, Morgana enchants some snakes to scare the horses, and those snakes do end up biting Leon and Leon and Percival. And Gwen is sent ahead to flee back to Camelot, but is caught by Morgana, who kidnaps her and takes her to the Dark Tower, where she sets up a room filled with mandrake roots, which cause Gwen to hallucinate all of her loved ones and the people that she cares about, taunting her, laughing at her, being cruel to her, etc. And this is done in order to break down her mind so that Morgana can then become her friend again and the only one she trusts, etc. And at the very end of the episode, we do see that that is the case. Gwen, after being rescued, wakes up, leaves Camelot, and meets up with Morgana in the woods. The second plotline in this episode is, of course, Arthur's quest to try to save Gwen, and it starts with Elian bringing Leon and Percival back to Camelot, where Gaius treats them, realizes there's dark magic in the wounds, and therefore we know that Morgana is the one who set it up. Arthur, of course, can't stand that his wife has been kidnapped, so he then brings all of the knights, including Elian, who is just as zealous as Arthur is because it's his sister, and they begin a quest to try to find Gwen. They return to the woods where the attack happened. They find her horse. They then also find tracks leading away, and they follow those tracks, ending up at the impenetrable forest. And that is when they realize that she's likely in the Dark Tower, which is a ominous place that all knights are meant to fear, according to Arthur. They then enter the impenetrable forest and try to make their way towards the tower. However, they do end up basically going in a circle and wasting the first day. While they camp for the night, we then see Merlin leaving the camp and going to follow a spirit named Queen Mab. And Queen Mab does speak in riddles, but she essentially says, "You with your magic can find a way through this forest," but gives a warning that if he chooses to find their way through the forest and get to the Dark Tower, one of their number is not going to return. Merlin then decides to push on anyways, and he uses his magic to lead the group out of the impenetrable forest. They then end up on like a desert type plain. They walk across the desert. Merlin trips and almost falls onto a sword, showing that there are a lot of skeletons all around, but luckily he just misses it. They help him back up. They make it to the Dark Tower. When they make it to the Dark Tower, things seem a bit too easy until they get to one of the levels where it is booby-trapped with a bunch of flagstone pressurized plates. If you step on it, arrows shoot out of the gargoyle's mouths, and Elian manages to make it most of the way across, dodging these, and so he then decides to push on ahead while the others put swords down first to trigger the trap so that they can slowly make their way across the floor. Elian then finds Guinevere at the top of the tower, and he is warned that Morgana has set an enchanted sword to protect Gwen, and that it will fight to the death. Elian ignores her and starts fighting with the sword. He manages to defeat the sword by basically sending it out the window and then closing the shutters so that it like stabs through the shutters. Unfortunately, before he does that, he is fatally wounded in the side by the sword and dies in Gwen's arms. And just after he dies, that is when Arthur and the rest make it up to them. They then hold a boat funeral for Elian and send him down the river, setting the boat aflame. And that is when we see our final scene again with Gwen betraying them all to go into the forest to meet Morgana, who she agrees is the only person she can trust in Camelot, and now they are allies. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode. As always, we will rank on our mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking, and the mostly objective ranking is only mostly objective because bias and judgment do still apply. So first off, we have our single episode supporting character introduction, and this is the Spirit Queen Mab, who basically looks like a fairy. Then we have, oh, and she's worth 1 point. And then we have our multi-season supporting character development. Gwen is kidnapped by Morgana and brainwashed due to Mandrake roots and Stockholm Syndrome. That is worth 3 points. Then we have 3 points for Gwen allying with Morgana, betraying Camelot. And then we have 3 points for Elian dying, and that brings us all the way up to 10 points. However, there were some negatives. The first negative, of course, is the negative messaging and behavior that was shown throughout. Obviously, when people are villains, you kind of expect certain levels of poor behavior from them, so the kidnapping, the psychological torture, worth mentioning, but I'm not really taking points for it because Morgana is evil, so she does evil things. That is expected within her character's, you know, overall profile. I don't know I don't know, I'm not finding the word I'm looking for. Well, it's basically within the character settings of Morgana to be evil. But Gwen's betrayal obviously was not fully in her character settings. She has betrayed before, but when she did that, again, magic was also involved. Obviously, cheating with Lancelot. The feelings were her own, they were there, but magic was used to bring those feelings up to the surface and had a certain level of compulsion by bringing them up to the surface to strengthen them, and that is what drove Gwen to act on them. But it did not create the feelings, and it did not take away her free will, which is why it still counts as adultery, in my opinion, which is why she has betrayed Arthur in the past. And then we once again see her betraying Arthur here, but once again, there are extenuating circumstances. Example, the kidnapping, psychological torture caused by the Mandrake roots, which then in combination with Morgana trying to be the good guy and the one who gives her relief from this and basically brainwash her, Stockholm Syndrome, are the extenuating circumstances. But she does fight, she is the one who ultimately gives in, and it is her free will to then ally with Morgana. So it still counts as betrayal, in my opinion, and this is where the bias and judgment do apply. I took 2 points for that. And then I also took 3 points for the failed emotional impact. Elian has been a character that has been a supporting character for multiple seasons. However, I can only remember one episode that really heavily focused on Elian as a character. And that was when the druid boy who had drowned started to possess him. But he never really, because he was very background, and in the group of knights, Gawain stands out because of his personality. Percival has unique armor. Leon just has been there the longest. There are standout knights, and Elian just kind of fades into the background of the knights. And so I didn't have a strong attachment to Elian as a character, and you would think, him being Gwen's brother, that he would have played a larger role, but he didn't really seem to be focused on throughout it. And as a result of that, I could understand Gwen's reaction to him dying. She cried. Actress was able to fake those tears. Good job. But ultimately, as an audience member, I didn't really feel anything about it. And I also think that dying through a magical sword is a very ungrand way to go. Like, if you were going to go, it's not an entertaining way to go. I mean, he lost to a magic sword. And a sword that he defeated ultimately pretty easily, only after he got this, wound. And I feel like like I said, I didn't have the attachment to the character to feel much when he died, and I know that the people who are running the show, who are writing the scripts, wanted people to feel something when Elian died, and I didn't. That's why it was a failed emotional impact. But this too is where bias and judgment come into play, because of course it didn't work on me because I didn't feel an attachment to the character, but I am absolutely positive that there were probably many people out there who it did work on and maybe would disagree with it being a failed emotional impact and might say, no, I cried, it was successful, and for them that may be true. But again, my bias and judgment, it didn't work on me, therefore I am taking the points for the failed emotional impact, which brings this episode to a 5 out of 10, mostly objectively. And that now brings us to the season 4 rankings so far on our mostly objective side, and we have Arthur's Bane in first, followed by the Death Song of Uther Pendragon, the Desir, Another Sorrow, and then this episode does come in 5th and is currently last place, The Dark Tower. Now, personally, for me, I enjoyed parts of the episode, and I didn't enjoy other parts of the episode. I do like Morgana, and I do like her when she's evil, more so than I did when she was good. I do think she gets a lot less screen time when she's evil than she did when she was good, which is a tragedy in my opinion. But I do like Morgana as an evil character, so I did like that, she was doing the evil things, and she was having some successes again, and I do think that her and Gwen were good friends, and even though she was being really mean, like the whole trying to rekindle their friendship, even if it was in the worst way imaginable, I didn't necessarily hate. But again, like I'm not a big fan of Gwen as a character being the Guinevere. If she was just a maid named Gwen, I would like her a lot more, but as the Guinevere of Legends, I don't like her as that at all. So those parts, I was like, meh. And I felt like they spent a lot of time on the ghosts and her laying like, freaked out, and that's good because it shows like what she was going through and how Morgana was successful. But for me personally, because I'm not a big fan of the character and she was the only one in those scenes for the most part, except the brief times when Morgana came to invite her to dinner or to try to convince her that they're friends and that Morgana will be there for her and she can trust Morgana. She was kind of that. And then the ultimate ending is that she does end up giving in and joining Morgana's side, and the brainwash does end up being successful, which is unfortunate, and did not enjoy that either. So that aspect of the episode wasn't huge on, though there were still some aspects to like. The other aspect, the other aspect of the episode was, of course, the quest Arthur went on in order to get to the tower. And that was fun. Like there was some comedy with them getting lost and going in circles in the like impenetrable forest. And I do like that it was Merlin and his magic that happened to help them get out. But it was also kind of the small magic, like where like the only part that you see of the like the only thing that the magic did was basically make Merlin's eyes glow and then pre-show us the route that they would take. And so it was like it was magic, yay, but it was like very small magic, like very subtle magic that didn't have any cool effects to it. Also, there was some fun, I guess, with the booby trapping of the castle. Honestly, I felt more entertained when I was watching it than I do describing it. When I'm describing it, I'm like, did I like it as much as I thought? It was entertaining. The struggles that they went through and the journey that they went on, and the fact that they, it was a quest. It wasn't just like a single setting like in the Castle of Camelot. It was a sorry. It was a let's leave Camelot and go through, all of these trials to get to Gwen, but oh, we showed up just a little too late. Again, Elian died. I didn't feel it, but I do believe that there were people out there who would have felt Elian's death on an emotional level. Ultimately, I did decide to give it a 6 out of 10 because I didn't hate it while I was watching it. I found that it did have the entertainment value there, but just as I said, when I look back on it, when I look at each piece of what I watched, I'm kind of like, nothing really made me go, wow, amazing, great. You know, it was just bland and blah looking back. But at the time, I was entertained. I did not check the time while I was watching the episode. I think it was well paced, especially as they cut in and out. They didn't spend too much time on any one scenario and drag anything out too long, so that also is good. It did have good pacing. Yes, ultimately a 6 out of 10, which brings the personal ranking list to in first, Arthur's Bane, Another Sorrow in second, The Death Song of Uther Pendragon, followed by this episode I put in fourth place, The Dark Tower, and then The Desir is last so far. Bringing us now to our series ranking so far. And we have season 4 in first, followed by season 2, season 3, then season 1 on the mostly objective side. Season 5 so far has a score of 42 out of a possible 110. On the personal ranking side, it's basically in season order in reverse. We have season 4 in first, followed by 3, 2, and then 1. And season 5 so far has a score of 36 out of a possible 110. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Merlin Season 5, Episode 5, The Dark Tower. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.